Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me on this 4th of July. I'm continuing work on part 2 of the Great Munger Traverse, but in the meantime, and in light of recent events, I felt it necessary to deliver this short message to you all. We live in an incredibly polarized time. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that the American people haven't been this divided since the Civil War and the periods around it. Regardless of your political stance, though, I would like to take this moment to call your attention to perhaps the most terrifying ruling in not only modern US politics, but in the entire history, perhaps, of this union. On July 1st, 2024, the Supreme Court of the United States voted 6-3 in favor of a ruling that states that any current, previous, or future president cannot be prosecuted for actions taken while in office, so long as those actions were reasonably aligned with their duties as president. This immunity is, quote, absolute with respect to their core constitutional powers, end quote. While the wording of this ruling might seem only mildly concerning, if not innocuous, it should, by all accounts, terrify you just as much as it has terrified me. All a president would reasonably have to do in order to justify an action that was reasonably aligned with their core duties would be to cite something like national security or internal affairs. For something like assassinating a political opponent. If you think I'm reaching, the Supreme Court was asked that very question on the day of the ruling, and they answered in the affirmative. To make this plain, the highest court of the land just stated that a sitting president could assassinate a political rival and not be held criminally accountable for their actions. This ruling is significant in two ways. First, it undermines the core value of nobody is above the law. As this ruling is the first of its kind in US history, this statement, legally speaking, has been true. Until now. Until this. Going forward, there exists one person who is. Second, when put into the context of the upcoming election, the gravity of this decision cannot be overstated. While these newly unrestrained powers currently lie with sitting President Joe Biden, there is a distinct possibility that these powers will transfer to Donald Trump. Though I believe that no person should have this level of immunity, I would rather see it in the hands of someone who respects the rule of law, a person who chooses democracy over dictatorship, a person who at least publicly values equality for all, as opposed to a radical convicted felon who incited insurrection. Regardless of your political view, whether right-wing or left-wing or somewhere in between, I hope that you can see how this ruling runs counter to the very principles that this country was founded upon. 248 years ago to the day, a unanimous declaration emerged from the original 13 colonies. In this declaration, cited so often by right-wing ultranationalists, it states, quote, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. The history of the present is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly, proposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions from within. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent and of superior to the civil power. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. I acknowledge that we are polarized. I acknowledge that we don't see eye to eye. I acknowledge that, on some topics, our opinions may be so fundamentally different as to create a near insurmountable rift between us. Just for today, however, I ask us to bridge that gap and take a step back and just look at where we are. If this union survives to reach its 300th birthday, what will the people of that age say of what we do in the coming months? Will they praise us for coming together across differences and standing up for the fundamental values of freedom and equality upon which this country rests? Or will they mark us as the incompetent and apathetic fools that led this country into darkness? Was June 30th, 2024 our last day of living in the land of the free and the home of the brave? You have until November to decide. I hope you'll make the right choice.